And this is really the trend as to what's been happening in relation to our wagon wheel KPIs. We can see that our biological greenhouse gas emissions have been reducing each year, and this is the story that we've told from when we took out the unprofitable supplement use and we started focusing on a lower stocking rate and higher per cow production. And we can also see that when we model the nitrogen in our system using Overseer, we've managed to continue to track that modelled nitrogen loss down even further. So we're always thinking, how can we do this better? And this is why we started to sit down with Balance and talk about what does our pasture-based system look like in relation to how we use nitrogen. And this is where N came on board, and we started to talk about how do we manage and how do we plan for nitrogen efficiency use within our farm business. So I'd like Ian to come up and just to talk about a little bit about a tool that we've been using for our farm and how it started to guide how we use nitrogen. So come on up, Ian. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ian works as both in extension and science, don't you? Across the greater North Island in this subject. So he's got a wealth of knowledge around how Overseer functions, how My Pasture Planner function, and how it also works within a farming system. So welcome, Ian.
Right. Thanks, Joe. And I know we've all been sitting here for a long time, so I think it'd be a good idea if we all stood up and had a bit of a stretch before we get going, because I know my backside is getting a bit sore. Yeah. Normal clicker? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that's making us all feel a little bit better. I know we're not used to sitting down on our chuffs all day long. Right, so thanks, Joe. And My Pasture Planner, tool for the times. It sounds like we've just developed it just now, but Balance has been working on this tool for a long time. About 8 or 10 years ago, we got some money through the Primary Growth Partnership funding and to look at increasing nitrogen use efficiency on farm as one of the key outcomes. And My Pasture Planner was originally released a few years ago, and it was called NGuru, as some of you might have come across before. And My Pasture Planner was actually a enhanced NGuru model with a lot more features in it than previously. I'll just skip through that. We're a little bit behind time, so I'll just skip through that little bit there. But to set context, and Joe set some of it already, there's got a lot of pressures on end use at the moment. A lot of environmental impacts that are happening not just on dairy farms, but on sheep and beef and horticultural and arable blocks as well. And a lot of focus has been on leaching of nitrates into aquifers and eutrophication of streams, etc., and greenhouse gas emissions, primarily around nitrous oxide as far as nitrogen is concerned. There's a lot of social impacts. A lot of these are perceived impacts. Some of them are real still, but they actually have a big driving force in policy and legislation as well. And then there's the actual legislation and policy that's out there. The total synthetic nitrogen cap we would have heard about. Synthetic mean manufactured nitrogen products such as urea, sustain, ammo. And that cap of 190 kilograms of N per hectare per year for the whole farm. Incidentally, it's also, as a lot of people aren't aware, it's also a cap on the actual individual per hectare of grazed pasture as well on your farm. So it's not just a whole farm cap, it's a, a per hectare cap as well. There's N application limits, and PC1 for the Waikato has proposed a 30 kilograms N per hectare per dressing. Is that still there, Bala? Yep, it's still planned. Yep, thank you. And there's N-leaching reductions in various places throughout the country, like in Canterbury. Some catchments have got to reduce their N losses by 30%, up to 30% by 2022. And we know that Otago have some set hard leaching limits within various catchment types. So that put pressure on to improve our end-use efficiency, and My Pasture Planner is one of the tools that can help us do this. So how do we do this? How does it do this? It utilises the knowledge there that AgResearch had gained around the total soil nitrogen test. Okay? And the other tests that are there, the mineral N and the available N, are very fluid in their status within the soil, but the total soil N test is quite stable over time. And I'll explain how the test works on the next slide. But what my pasture plan uses that total N test, and we can often grow more pasture for the same amount of nitrogen we're putting on, or the same amount of pasture for less nitrogen going on. And both those will help us improve our in-use efficiency. So what it allows us to do is to help to meet those 3 R's of the right fertiliser in the right place at the right time. And the fourth one is the right product, which is what you'd work out with your nutrient specialist on farm, which product is the right one to use. I just pull all those up. We do know that soil N varies for a range of factors, and 3 of the main ones being topography, soil type and farm management, such around cropping, cultivation and effluent for the farm management. Has a big impact on that total N value. The data that AgResearch came up with, if I just go back a bit so we can see that graph, we'll see on the graph there 2 stylised lines. Now this looks like a made-up graph, but that's actually off real data from AgResearch. So we can see there that as the total soil N increases in the soil there, for every kilo of applied nitrogen, you get a lower response, less dry matter per kilo of nitrogen applied at the highest total N test compared to the lower total soil N. Okay? And what my pasture planner does is uses those total soil Ns in the soil on a block basis to target those areas to apply most of the nitrogen, to recommend where most of that nitrogen should go. On our farm, we can see the 2 lowest areas on the farm are these 2 blocks there where the arrows are pointing to. And that's where in the model, when I ran it through, the model did actually try to apply most of the N there. So it targets, again, the low total soil nitrogen areas on the farm for the maximum response to that applied N fertiliser, so you can improve your in-use efficiency. Oops. So some of the model assumptions we need to be aware of. It requires each management block to have a total soil N test to get the best value out of that model. Pasture growth rates that we use are reflective of the farm system, and I'll just touch on that in a couple of slides. And other nutrients are not limiting, okay, so there's no other constraints going on to reduce your pasture growth rates. And the impact of soil moisture and temperature is reflective of those pasture growth rates. So we really need some pasture growth rates in the model, and these pasture growth rates are based on pasture growth which is not nitrogen enhanced or not artificial nitrogen enhanced, okay? And so we need pasture growth rates which are more reflective of the recent seasons, the last 3 to 5 years, but they can be quite difficult to get. And that the nitrogen fertiliser recommended is applied at that rate, time and place as recommended. Currently, it's only able to be run by a balance and nutrient specialist. And we've got 2 or 3 here today, and more than happy to take questions from you guys afterwards as you're walking around the farm. The benefits, it aids those nitrogen planning discussions, so we need to be doing these shortly as we're coming into the new financial year. And it helps to reduce N inputs and still match that animal feed demand, and can maximise feed grown as well with the total amount of N that you've got available, and helps to meet those N cap restrictions. And as I said before, right rate, right time, right place. And it gives confidence that we're all doing the right thing, because we want you guys to be doing the right thing as well. And it's free for balance customers at the moment. What do we need? We need a My Balance account, a digital farm map in My Balance, at least at the paddock scale, and a monthly pasture growth rates for your farm system. The default's available within the model, but you can use your own, but remember they've got to be growth rates without nitrogen having been applied. And we need a recent Overseer FM nutrient budget, because we extract data out of Overseer into the model. And that total soil N test for each management block. And also what is useful but not critical is the amount of nitrogen used on a monthly basis at a farm level in the previous year. So the model, I'll go quickly through this. There's 4 data input pages. The key on this page is the monthly pasture growth rate. We're in the Waikato there, as you should be able to see. I don't know, up there, and there's all the regions are in there. We're actually quite lucky in the Waikato when you go over to district. There's actually 23 districts within the Waikato which have some default pasture growth rates. So we should be able to find one which suits your farm system quite easily in the Waikato. But we've got all the regions and the districts throughout the country that are in there. Over here, there's a lot of data on here, but the key is the top red square is where the data's pulled from overseer. Primarily of interest is the feed demand from all the animals on farm. Comes on a monthly basis. And the next two are setting some of the constraints in the model, the amount of nitrogen available, the maximum rate able to be applied and the minimum rate to be applied, and compulsory months when we must apply nitrogen because that's individual to your farm system. We've got a page here, we can add the block data, and this is where we put the total nitrogen soil test in, and we go to the farm map here, like L farm, and here I've selected that block 7, and then it utilises the information about that block that's in the model to run. And the final page is a little bit around financial data, bit around kilograms and milk solids per kilogram then applied, current milk price. When I ran the model, it was a bit lower than what it is today. Seems like the price is changing every day at the moment, but that's there. And then some of the costs around applied N and cost of stored feed. And there's two calculations we run within the model. One is meeting animal feed demand, and one is just model, go and grow as much grass as you can, put it wherever you like, but just grow as much grass as you can. And that's the optimised N budget one there. But the guts of this is the reports. And sorry if I'm moving a bit quickly, but we're a bit behind time here. We've got the fit to feed demand here, where we've gone out and said, let's just try and match feed demand. Now, it doesn't look good on this graph, but there's some reasons for that. The orangey, does it look orange to you guys, or yellowy, or olive? That line is the pasture feed demand. The blue bars on the graph, they are the pasture growth rate without nitrogen having been applied, or the pasture growth. And the grey bars are what the extra nitrogen grown was from extra dry matter grown from applied nitrogen last year, and the black bars are what the model is now predicting from the constraints we put in there. After discussions, I had a sit down with Joe and Tom, and we decided that we would constrain the model to only applying nitrogen to meet feed demand in August and April. So it's only looked at that, and it's applied 69 kilograms of N per hectare per year on average for the year on those two blocks. Okay, so we've only targeted those two months in this. The next one we did, I ran it and I just said to the model, put the model up and said, go and do your thing. And this is just to grow as much grass as possible. We had set a maximum of 120 kilograms of N per hectare for both of those, used 69 in the feed demand, and it used the whole 120 here. And you can see it's grown at all in September, October and November, when you're going to get the best pasture growth rates anyway. Okay, and so, but it's targeted them to more is actually going on the lower total N blocks than the higher total N blocks. Some of the keys on here are I'm trying to shine my light on the screen, but that doesn't work. Is the total amount of N used up here, and see we've got 18 tonne grown there, which is quite different to what Joe and Tom were talking about earlier, but this is optimising everything. So, and this is where it becomes really important to have this discussion with your nutrient specialist, because we can go off on a tangent thinking we're achieving more or less than what we really are. So we have to sit down with the nutrient specialist and discuss through things, how it's working. We've got the N response and a sort of a net return on N over here, which is up 13k on there. But we're just growing as much grass as we can and then moving it around the farm after that. But what we actually wanted to do was match what the farm system and how that was working out. So we wanted to grow grass to meet the feed demand in April and August, and then discussions with Tom, he wants to put on 25 kgs of N in September to cover for when those crops go in October, and you've got all those paddocks out of production or out of grazing production at that time. So we need to have enough cover going into that to get the cows through until those crops are producing. So that went on in September, as we can put that data into the model. And then I ran the optimised N budget again, and that told the model to use whatever nitrogen was left just to grow as much feed as possible. And this is what we came up with here. It looks pretty similar to what they've been doing over the last few years, but some of the rates applied are a little bit different. So we're quite happy with that outcome. Yeah. So, in summary, I've just got a few notes here. My Pasture Planner is a great tool, but remember it's an aid, it's a model, so it's an aid to your nitrogen planning discussions, and we should be thinking about having them shortly as we're coming to the end of this season and preparing for the next season. And what I can do is you can grow more pasture for less N, potentially, or same pasture for less N. It can help identify opportunities to better utilise that nitrogen on farm, help us meet that N-use efficiency and reduce that, and increase our N-use efficiency, and reduce our N surplus, which is a bit of a focus with Fonterra now as well, and achieve that 190 cap at the whole farm level at least. And we've got a plan in place to try and get that model to be able to do that, meet that cap at the block level as well. And I'll aid that fertiliser planning, and it's free to balance customers at the moment, and only able to be utilised by balanced staff. So that was a quick overview, and I know it's a lot to take in, but we've got JB and Mark and Aaron sitting in a nice row here, and Ian at the back, and myself. So hit us up as we walk around the farm to find out more information, and if we've got time, we can take some questions now, Joe. Not to my knowledge. Ian, any comments?
No, not that I know of. I know that totally, because it seems quite ironic, we're still testing everything else but not nitrogen. So the first thing was, what would be a nitrogen soil test, a total N? That you'd only do about every 5 years because it relates a lot to the organic matter. So that's a very frequent test. So I know they, agree that makes a lot of sense as a starting point. I don't know if we've got a decision support by that.
Yeah. But we're more than happy to sell you our nitrogen. Which one are we thinking of?
Not necessarily. So this year we're in a situation where covers were high. We start our crops pretty much in January. We didn't want to push more feed forward, so even though recommended best practice for tillering, we're normally get through with a longer rotation. We don't always put nitrogen on specifically in December, and we don't need it. So we do have quite strong.
No.
We do have quite strong drivers as to when and why we would put it on, and this year we didn't put it on in December. We didn't need it. Yeah.
Remember too that the model's a model, and it gives you a guideline for the coming year, and we've got to be flexible, as you well know, within our farming systems. And if things change, we can go back and rerun the model with some actual data from previous and predict what we need going forward. So we've got it's flexible. It's a tool, not the hard and fast rule. Yeah.